For an artist, making your own sketchbook is really enjoyable because it puts you in control of the book. You can do it as big or as small as you want. You can choose the type of paper to suit how you like to work, choose the number of pages and all those sorts of things. Also, it's quite nice to make something quite tangible in more of a craft sense to balance up the painting that you're doing. I've chosen 4 different designs that I think are really straightforward, and each has an advantage and a disadvantage, but you don't need any specialist equipment. And in this short series of films, I'm going to show you those 4. So today I'm going to show you a perfect bound sketchbook that is very much like the binding you would have on a paperback. I'll also show in another film this sort of binding using little ring tabs, and I'm going to show you 2 different types of concertina books. You can make them as fancy as you want, or you can keep them totally plain. Decoration is up to you and your creativity. So my name's Liz Chatterton. I'm a professional artist based in Berkshire, and every week I bring you a tip, trick or technique that I wish someone had told me about ages ago. And this week is all about how to make a perfect bound sketchbook. The main advantage of the perfect bound book like this is that it opens flat. If you are doing a sketch, you could actually work right across that fold or on the individual pages, and you can add as many pages as you want to your book. I wouldn't go crazy and make one sort of the size of Harry Potter, simply because the spine is glued and I'm not sure of the total strength of it. This is done with 2 hard covers, and there is no hard cover on the spine. I've actually taped the spine before putting this decorative paper on top. You can do a hard spine which would make it stronger, but that's a bit complicated, and as I said at the beginning, these are meant to be books for artists rather than for specialist bookbinders. I think a proper bookbinder would look at this and probably roll their eyes. So what do we need to actually make this perfect bound book? Of course, you need the paper that's going to go inside. It can be watercolour paper, and I'm going to use this handmade watercolour paper. It could be cartridge paper. It could be pastel paper, acrylic paper, whatever you want, and the weight is up to you as well. Think about how you're going to use a sketchbook and what might be the perfect paper for you. We'll need a cover, and it needs to be something hard. It very easy would be to use Mountford offcuts. You can often get them for free, or traditionally grey board, which would need covering. You could use the cover off an old book and just recycle it. We need somewhere to work. We might be using quite large sheets of paper, so give yourself space. We'll need newspaper to protect so that the glue doesn't go everywhere. I am very mucky. Maybe a cutting board just to protect things as well. We need a ruler, pencil, something to cut with. So could use scissors, could use a sharp knife. We need glue. Ideally your glue should be a PVA. It should be acid free. If it's not acid free, I wouldn't get too upset about it, simply because is your sketchbook going to be around in 100 years time, and will you mind? Anyway, we need something to put it on with, a brush, or there you go, I have got a brush, brush or applicator. And we need something to fold our pages, because with making a sketchbook, accuracy is really important. Traditionally, bookbinders use this, and it's called a bone folder. It's not bone, it's made out of plastic now. That's to smooth down edges, but you can use the handles of your scissors, or even like a kitchen knife, the handle of a kitchen knife, to smooth down folds, just as long as it doesn't mark your paper. I think that's it. I'll mention other things if I think of them on the way through, but it's not much, and you should have those probably lying around. So let's prepare some of the inside pages. You can decide, of course, what size you want to do. I have got this sheet of handmade watercolour paper. Look, it's got lovely deckled edge. I thought it would be an interesting paper for my sketchbook, and I am going to fold it into basically 4 pieces across the shorter side. My final sketchbook will be that size. That's what I'm aiming for. So let's start. I'm going to struggle slightly because the edges are so uneven, so this might have to be a little bit of an approximation. If your edges are very straight, just line them up and fold your paper in half. Now, I talked about that bone folder or using the edge of my knife, and the reason is we have to make sure every single fold is sharp. So you just squish it down, and say if you're using the edge of that knife, that would be fine. You could use your thumbnail, but your thumb will get sore, so any of those will work. Now, I have decided that I want to have a torn edge. Because this is a handmade paper, I want to sort of reflect the deckled edge rather than cutting it. If you want to cut it so that you've got a sharp edge, use your scissors, use your sharp knife on a cutting board. And I'm doing this really carefully so that tear does not go wild and go across the page. And this paper I know will tear because I've used it before, and I end up with a nice torn edge which will go with the deckled edge. Now I need to do exactly the same with these 2 pieces of paper. So I'm lining it up, doing that rough fold, smoothing it down, just doing it nice and gently. I will end up with a strip of paper. I'm now going to fold that strip of paper in half, lining up the edges, smoothing off every single fold. I'm going to do that backwards and forwards. And that is 1 page of my sketchbook. I now need to do this with the rest of the paper until I've got enough pages in my sketchbook to keep me happy. On the whole, you will spot that most sketchbooks have multiples of 4 in them, because printers just find it easier to divide paper into 4s, 8s, 16s. But you could have 15 pages if you want. That is up to you. I now have a whole stack of folded paper. You can do this with single sheets. That is no problem. You know, if you wanted, say, to take an existing sketchbook to pieces and turn it into a hardbound sketchbook, you could just take the pages out and use single pages. I've put this, because it's got a mark on it, this piece of paper, I put it on top because that's going to be stuck to the cover and that mark will be hidden. So just in case you saw that and wondered. Now, we have to get all these folded edges absolutely lined up. So you can see why it was so important to get those creases as flat as possible. And if you look at it and think some of those creases aren't as good as they could be, go over them now. To line them up, you tap the folded edges or the sharp edges that you want to glue onto a flat surface, and then visually check that they are good. A couple of bulldog clips would be incredibly useful to keep everything in place. I didn't mention those at the beginning, did I? If you're concerned about them marking your paper, just put a little spare bit of paper underneath. We're going to put glue along here, so don't put the clips so that it obscures that bit. Now you can see that at the edge it is compressed and it's bulging out in the middle. If you can see that with yours, maybe you need a couple of flat weights. I've got a couple of chopping blocks from the kitchen, so another alternative rather than using the clips would just be to sandwich it between two boards. Again, just leaving that edge exposed so that they are equally compressed all along. Bookbinders use a little press like this, and it's called a nipping press. What you can do is put your book block in, again get it right to the edge, making sure that we haven't disturbed anything, and then tighten these to keep everything in place. With this all lined up, however you're doing it, whether that was with the clips or a press, now is the glue time. So I have got white PVA glue, and you're looking for a glue that will stay flexible even when it's dried. We don't want this cracking. I think I said at the beginning, ideally we want it to be acid free so it doesn't eat into the paper, and you need to apply it generously to the spine, and basically the glue will stick this all together. You don't want it seeping in between the pages, because then you would end up with the pages won't open out flat, which is one of the joys of this perfect binding. So you need to be really generous with this glue. We're going to let it dry, and we're going to do 2 or 3 coats, maybe even 4, just for good luck. The first layer of glue has just about dried, and now we need to repeat the process very carefully, generously applying a good coat of that PVA glue. We'll let that dry and then repeat it a couple of times more. Time to prepare the cover. So this is a hardback book and we need a hard cover. The easiest thing to do is actually to use offcuts of mountboard. Get them in nice colours so they wouldn't need any decoration or adding to, unless you want to. Traditional way of doing a cover is to use this, which is called grey board. It's very cheap to buy and pretty widely available. So you could do that, and then to cover it in a decorative cover, because on its own it's pretty ugly. Of course, you could, if you haven't got grey board, what you can do is use an old sketchbook and use the back of it and just take that off, because that is grey board, so nice bit of recycling. Or you could use an old hardback book and just take the cover off it and use that board. So to cover it, you need a piece of decorative paper, and I found this paper with I don't know, some sort of flowers embedded in it, which I thought would be fun. You cut your cover to be slightly larger than your pages, because this will protect the paper inside. So this will get scuffed, not the paper inside. It needs to be 2-3 centimetres, inch and a bit larger all the way round, and at the corners you mitre it to take off those triangles, not right up to the size of the board, and I'll show you why in a second. To protect our surface with just newspaper, because we are now going to glue. Something to bear in mind, that if your paper has a pattern, you might want to centre it on your grey board. And then we put our glue on to the paper, not to the board. We need to be pretty generous with the glue, but not silly. And we really want to be very careful not to get glue on the front of our decorative paper. So hold it in place and spread the glue outwards. So it's going to go onto the newspaper, but not onto the front of this. Your cover paper shouldn't be too thin, because what you'll find is that it will wrinkle if your paper is too thin once you put the glue on it. I'll pick that up and carefully turn that over, so I've got non-gluey paper. You then place your board in the middle of that paper and firm it down. Start at one of the narrow edges and fold it over into place. And then what you need to do is, with your thumbnail, nip in at the edge. Same here, just using your nail, nipping at the edge. Now let's do the other short edge, so just fold it over, stick it down, nip it in. Now we can do a long edge, just gently fold that over. You can even sort of roll it on the paper to get a sharper edge if you want. Turn it round, we've got those nipped in there, and then do that. And there we have our cover, with lovely neat corners, none of that ugly old grey board showing. And what we have to do is cover it with our non-stick paper and then weight it down under a heavy cookery book, in a press if you've got one, whatever, and just let that dry so it doesn't warp. We're on the homeward straight. Our block has dried and it's all holding together. I've got our two covers which are all dried and they haven't warped. And now we need to construct, but I'm going to be a bit belt and braces here, and I've cut a piece of gaffer tape that I am going to use to just reinforce that spine. So you don't have to do this, but I don't know, it's going to be covered up, doesn't matter. And just to reinforce that a little bit more and press that in place. Of course, if you've got some nice washi tape or something like that, something decorative, then actually you could leave that showing. But that's what I've done there. And now we need to put our covers on. Decide which one you think is the prettiest, which way up you want it to go. I think probably like that. Line up the edge of the book block with the edge of the cover. There. So the cover is bigger all the way round, but not at the spine. And you can just tap that in place and make sure it's nice and central. We need to protect our work from glue, so just open the first page and put some paper in there, and we are going to glue all over the first page, again quite generously but not silly, being really careful with the edges. When you're happy, get rid of your sticky paper. Make sure you've got your cover there. And flip your book over, line it up. Remember, the spine is going to be flush all the way around like that. Let's just check. You can see how that front page covers all the edges of your cover paper and the grey board, and that's perfect. Now we need to do the same with the back cover. So again, just slip in a bit of newspaper. Just to protect, because if you stuck the entire book together at this point, you would be upset. When you spread the glue out, remove that sticky bit of paper, and then you can flip it. Make sure you've got your cover up the way you want it, and then flip it on over, making sure the corners of your covers line up and the spine lines up. And then when you're happy, press it down. So that effectively is our book. But as I say, that cover looks a bit yucky where we put the extra gaffer tape just to secure it. So what I've done is chosen a toning piece of paper. I've cut it the width of the book there, the depth of the book, and the same on the other side, and just folded it. I am now going to stick that round just to hide the spine. It doesn't have any practical effect, construction effect as such. It's more decorative, so you could leave this out. And as I say, if you've got some nice washi tape or decorative tape, in fact, you could even tape around the whole thing. But I don't, and I think this should look nice. And then I'm going to put that very carefully in place to line the things up. Just flip that over. Make sure I've lined that up. Haven't quite got it right at that end, so let's quickly, before the glue dries, just see what I've managed to do there. And I think my problem was that I had this a little bit high. That's fine, nothing to panic about. Oh, that's loads better. And there is our beautiful book, which I'm really pleased with the look of it. I need to weight this down again and really make sure that is dry. And when it is, we'll come back and see if I still like it. Well, as promised, I said I'd just come back and show you when it was fully dry, and I'm really pleased with this. It's got that nice cover with the embedded flowers. I think just finishing off the spine looked good. And then we've got the torn and the deckled edges all the way through with this really heavyweight, rough watercolour paper. And as you can see, the book opens nicely and will stay flat, so it'll be really nice to work on. Or if I want to, as I say, I can work right across the fold. So I'm pretty chuffed with that, and I hope you could see how easy it was to make and how you can make your own very, very special sketchbook without a lot of hassle.